Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of DC Comics comes one of the most iconic superheroes of all time, a billionaire using real-world tech to combat the criminal element of Gotham City, where he fights every day to make the streets safe and ensure that his own personal tragedy will not happen to anyone else. We're talking about Batman. Batman was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger and debuted in Detective Comics number 27 on March 30th, 1939. Created in response to Superman, Batman was a normal man with no superpowers who initially killed criminals in his early stories. However, that later changed and Batman's mission revolved around a strong sense of justice that did not include murder. The original Batman character is Bruce Wayne, a billionaire playboy and one of the richest men in Gotham City. Bruce is the head of Wayne Enterprises, a company created by his father, Thomas Wayne. Bruce's life was forever changed as a child when his parents are murdered in front of him in Crime Alley. From that moment on, Bruce was determined to not only avenge them, but to wage a war on crime in an attempt to clean up the city and make it safe for those around him. Bruce travels the world and learns various forms of martial arts, training his body to endure pain and becoming a dangerous fighter. He eventually returns to Gotham and is inspired to don the cape and cowl after a bat flies into his study. Bruce, believing he must strike fear into the hearts of criminals, decides to become a bat. Batman quickly became one of the most popular characters in comic books, bringing a spotlight to DC Comics. Batman eventually joined the Justice League next to Superman as well as Wonder Woman, establishing the trio as DC's heavy hitters. Batman's rogues gallery of villains became arguably the greatest in comics, featuring characters like the Joker, the Riddler, the Penguin, and the Scarecrow. Catwoman, who was initially conceived as a villain, became a love interest for Batman, and Robin became his sidekick. The Batman character became more kid-friendly during the 1960s thanks to the TV series starring Adam West and Burt Ward. Batman and Robin were the dynamic duo, the Caped Crusaders, and they were featured in one campy episode after another. This also became the tone of the books, solidifying Batman as a kid's character. But Batman began to lose popularity over the years despite the assortment of talented creators who were charged with telling his stories. However, one of those creators, Frank Miller, is credited for revitalizing the character and making him relevant for a whole new generation. The Dark Knight Returns put Batman back on the map and reintroduced him to the mainstream in a way that had never been seen before. Batman Year One was also an important work by Miller, and the character once again became the hottest thing in comics. Batman has appeared in a variety of media other than comic books throughout the years, including newspaper strips, 1940s serials, animated TV series, and big-budget films. Though interpretations of the character continue to vary depending on the creative teams behind him, Batman remains one of the most important characters in the history of American fiction, and his impact on fans around the world continues to grow. And that's the lowdown on Batman. A lot of the conversations that comic book fans have with each other, with people maybe who are non-fans, and maybe just the casual movie-going audience, is what's your connection to superheroes? What is it that makes you love the books? Why do you want to go drop all this coin on the Marvel films, on the DC films, on whatever it is? Why do you want to go buy the latest Spider-Man game? What is it about these heroes that connects you to them? And we've all sat here and had these conversations. Any of us that have ever read a comic or collected, or whether it's hardcore collection or just casual, what have you, we've all got our own various answers. A lot of the answers center on the idea of, well, the heroes are what we want to be. That's what we aspire to be. Not perfect, but always willing to try to do the right thing. Infallible, obviously, and capable of making mistakes and able to screw up and do the wrong thing occasionally, but because they're only human for the most part, but they bounce back. They try to do the right thing the next time. They try to fix everyone and everything around them. And again, always trying to do the right thing, play within the system, play by the rules. And this is how, in a perfect world, we're all treating each other kindly and we're all trying to do the right thing. Never going to be a perfect world, kids, but if you can escape for a few minutes of your life during the day just by reading a comic, get into these heroes, try to live through them to a certain degree, One of the heroes in question that people often really connect to and often really relate to is Batman. And there's a very good reason for that. Batman has no abilities. He can't fly. He can't, run really fast. He can't really breathe underwater for an hour at a time. He doesn't have gills. He can't move things with his mind. Batman is just a dude. And in this grand concept of Batman, what Bob Kane and Bill Finger created, I doubt very seriously that back in the late 1930s, that either one of them could have ever guessed we'd be sitting here in 2021 doing a podcast, a radio show over digital format about a creation that they came up with for a funny book. And yet here we are on the 6M podcast talking about this very topic. Of course, the biggest reason why normal people can relate to Batman is because, again, he's just a human guy. And Phil, there's always been that belief out there, if you had enough money, enough resources, and you had enough of a commitment and an obsession with justice, anybody could become Batman. Now, it may not last very long. You'd probably get arrested eventually, or get killed or knifed in a back alley or whatever the case may be. But as we get started here, what do you think is the biggest thing that keeps drawing people back to this character? Is it the aesthetic, his suit, his gadgets, the car? Chicks dig the car, right? Is it the duality of Bruce Wayne Batman? Is it the fact that he's human? Is it all those things, or what do you think?
Um, I do think it's the aesthetic. I think in some ways it's the same aesthetic that makes Bond interesting to a lot of people, and that he's a slick, cool millionaire, and he has all of the gadgets, he has all the cars, and he can do all of these cool things. And then he has like the look of the bat suit, um, the way he instills fear. All of these things, add to his cool factor. Um, but I think, like you said earlier, what makes him so relatable is that he's a symbol for, just human ingenuity. What you can do with just your own abilities, not any kind of metagene or any superpowers.
Right, just determination and obsession. And you and I have spoke here on the show before about the fact that Bruce Wayne is so completely obsessed with being Batman. And depending on what writer is handling him at the moment or what director is handling him at the moment, his obsession can borderline on maybe abnormal or psychotic, maybe even way too obsessive to the point of this guy should be locked up and start speaking to some therapists because he needs some help. Um, it's that driving ambition, that driving belief that I'm not going to let anyone else go through what I went through. I mean, of course, we're talking about Crime Alley. His parents murdered in front of him at a very young age. And he spends the rest of his days trying to right that and trying to somehow find peace. Dude, to me, the story of Batman is a guy who is just trying to find peace, who's trying to fight the demons. Maybe not demons that he has, because he really didn't do anything wrong. I mean, it was done to him, but he wants to fight the demons for the sake of other people. I mean, in that way, he's very selfless and he's giving of himself. And you just get the feeling this guy would gladly lay his life on the line to save anyone because he really is trying to help. At what point do we go from that conversation about he's selfless and he's a hero and he's helping people to some of the twisted stuff that's going on around about him right now? And I hate to jump off with this, but you know, I'm sure you probably saw the Zack Snyder stuff, and you know, Batman's now having all kinds of crazy sex, and he's getting it on with Batgirl in a cartoon movie, and I just, what do you think is the fascination that some of these creators have with making Batman rated R? Why are we going down this road?
I think Batman always has an edge to him. He's always had an edge, and he's always a dark character. But there's a way to create a dark character that's accessible. He doesn't need to be, you know, in all of these adult situations. And I think Dark Knight Returns changed everything. Once Frank Miller gave us this version of Batman that was out of his norm, and you put him in all of these other like graphic situations, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, that's what I want to see my Batman as. I want my Batman to be, you know, grim and gritty and all of these. Yeah, I want him to swear and I want him to do all this other
Right.
stuff. It's like, but you don't need to do that to write dark stories. You can write dark stories without making it R rated.
Yeah, like you said, there is this desire for adults to make him adult. It's almost like, well, it's not enough that we relate to him. I want him to do the things I do, or I want him to do the things that they did in that Scorsese flick. I want him to, have oral sex with Catwoman. I still don't know. And dude, didn't Snyder commission that illustration to be done?
I don't know. I think it might be from a book. I'm not sure.
Jeez.
But I, listen, I mean, I just think there's this idea for a lot of adults that all these things need to grow up with us, and they just don't. I mean, and I've gotten into this debate with people about Batman and Wolverine, and people are like, "Well, they are adult characters." No, they're intrinsically characters for children. They're for comic books. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not dark tones and there are not mature stories that you can tell with them, but they're still inherently they're inherently fantastical. So there are on that level they are not for adults. Now, can adults still enjoy them? Yes, but that doesn't mean it's specifically for us.
Sure. I mean, that's like comparing Wolverine to Lobo. You can say, well, Lobo's a comedic take. Well, that's true. And it's absolutely a ripoff of Wolverine. We all know this. However, Lobo is more willing to go there because whether it's DC or maybe even Vertigo or whatever creators got him in DC at the time, they can do certain things with Lobo you can't do with Wolverine. So, I mean, you can say, well, Lobo's not a kid's character. I think that's the difference is how was the character created and what tone was he created? And like you said, if it was meant to be for kids, then yeah, you can take it and adapt it, but it won't. I don't know. What about the idea of retrofitting these characters to make it fit what you want it to be? That's not going to fundamentally change it, though, is it?
I mean, yeah, there's a difference between something like when we mentioned Frank Miller earlier,
Yeah.
like Sin City was created for the 18 plus crowd.
Right.
Um, even Watchmen is created for a more mature crowd. Those are all created from their beginning to be mature books. Yes, you can put Batman in those scenarios, but just because he's been put in those scenarios doesn't mean he's for that crowd. That is just some people's preferred take on him. But that doesn't mean that the character is inherently for adults. He's still
Yeah.
a man that dresses up like a bat.
Yeah, with tights, and I mean, well, they can call it chainmail, they can call it a steel mesh, whatever they want to call it. It still looks like tights, and when they draw it in the comics, and yeah, it's I don't know. Again, this idea of let's take this thing and retrofit it to make it please us, and he's got to be foul mouthed, and then dude, then you get into yeah, the whole deep psychoanalysis of this guy. That's like, well, why is he putting these kids in danger, and what is it that he has to be a father figure to these young Robins? But then when they need him the most, and they really want him to be a father and show love toward them, he's incapable of doing that, and he's got this twisted psychosis. I'm like, okay, sure, but I don't know. I think to me, I don't know if this is a character that I can even support anymore. The way he's been handled, the way they've put all these layers on him, the way well, he has to do this. And no, he doesn't. Why can't he just be a hero? Why does it have to be, well, he's twisted and dude, he's like has he already married Catwoman in the books?
I think they ended up not going through with it. I don't read
Ah,
Batman books regularly anymore. But that's the thing about comics. Comics are serial material, so nothing like that is going to stick long term. Like even
yeah.
if you have them married, they're eventually not going to be married because somebody's going to discover Batman for the first time at some point, and they're going to open that book and they're going to go, "Oh, he's married now." Like that's not what I think of Bruce Wayne when I think of Bruce Wayne. He's married. Like so, those things usually don't stick. Um, and that's that's kind of the gift and the curse of comic books. But I'm with you. I think that there are interesting things to do with his psychosis. I think there are stories to tell about why he dresses up like a bat, why he is so committed to the mission. Um, there, because you've got to be off in some way to want to
Yeah.
do that. And there's plenty of ways that you can delve into that. But all of this stuff where everybody wants to get into like the seedy side of Batman. No, the thing that makes Batman great is that he is in a environment that is incredibly seedy. Like he's in the most seedy comic book city there is, and he represents a beacon of hope in that. Yeah, he might be dark in some of the same ways, but there's a balance that you have to create. Otherwise, he's sitting in Arkham with just the rest of the nut jobs. Like,
Right. Right.
so yeah, I think there are ways that you can push him to the limit of that, but you always got to keep the balance. And if you're making him into this guy that would take in a teenage girl and have her as a protege and then eventually sleep with her, it's like I don't want my Batman doing that. Like no.
That's too much. It's too much. It's who am I? The moral authority here? I'm not, but I just don't. I don't need that or want that from Batman. That's not something I need to see or want to see. I don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's again, dude. It feels like to me. Well, we gotta grow this guy up. He's got to be. Yeah, he's no, he doesn't. God, what? Oh, and it seems like everybody agrees, Phil. It seems like all the comic book guys who handle him, directors and what, they're all, oh yeah, you're right. Let's do this. I don't understand that thought process.
Yeah, there are guys that have done dark stuff with him, and they've done it really, really well. Like I really enjoyed what Scott Snyder did with the book when he wrote it.
Yeah,
He did some very dark stuff. He brought in all of the Court of Owls stuff. He did some
that was a
really
good run
interesting.
too. Yeah,
He did some really interesting stuff with the book that I enjoy. Um, there's there's a lot of there's a lot of things you can do with the character in mature stories, but you don't have to lean into like some of the more perverse stuff that I feel. I just don't feel like you have to do that. And you don't have to make him into this he's driven, but you don't have to make him into a sociopath either. Like
right.
there's a way to write him and to still have heart to the book as well.
And it really we're probably going to use the word obsession a bunch in this show because that man, if there's one guy, he's the most obsessed character in the history of comics. I don't know if I can come up with anybody else. I'm talking about long term from the beginning to now. I can't think of another character that I can label as being obsessed about this, about what he's doing. He is obsessed with being Batman and with doing what he's doing, his mission, as you call it, which is absolutely what he refers to it as. But dude, this all goes back to the childhood trauma. And, you know, for anyone that's ever lost their parents or a parent, you know what that feels like. It is the worst feeling, especially when they're taken from you. They didn't die of natural cause. They didn't die of old age. They're taken from you. So I have always related to Bruce Wayne / Batman. Lost my dad killed by a drunk driver when I was 4.5. I told this story on the pod before. And I have always connected to Bruce because of that. Because when he talked about this, the pain and the loss and being alone, I still have my mom and she did a bang up job with me, I think. Did the best she could. But no, I absolutely know what that feels like. So that's my end with this guy. But dude, he fixates on that. He can't let it go. He will never be able to let it go and he can't move on with his life because he's always going to be that scared kid in the alley, or he's going to be determined to never be that scared kid in the alley, and maybe a combination of both. Dude, it's the whole idea of because it happened at such a young age. Had this happened when he was 16, we may not be talking about this character, but it's kids retain so much. And that trauma of seeing it happen in front of him is probably, if this were a real man, he would have been in therapy since that happened, more than likely. Maybe on meds, maybe could never have any sort of semblance of a real life or a normal life, in and out of foster homes, perhaps. I mean, disturbed is the word. But this guy, instead of being disturbed where he needs to be locked up or in a hospital, takes that obsession and decides, well, I'm going to fix it where this doesn't have to happen to anybody else again. I mean, without that drive, we don't have Batman. I mean, how else does this character start off, or a character like this, unless it starts off dark and bloodshed and murder? He can't, can he?
No, and I mean, there's been different iterations of the character before that, where he was a happier character. He was doing like the swashbuckling stuff.
Right.
Um, but because I'm just so used to that characterization that I understand Batman from that drive of this happened to me and I will never let this happen to anyone else. Or I've got to be better. I've got to do more, and I've got to stand up to the Joe Chills of the world. And I think that that's what makes him such a fascinating character. I think that's what makes him, like you said, so relatable, because anybody can take a stand. Um, Anybody can have something bad happen to them, and instead of wallowing in it and turning to despair, deciding I want to be better and I want to do better.
Yeah, making a decision that he has to, and plus he has the means. There's another point of this, Phil, another point of this conversation here. If he were poor, if the Waynes were poor, Batman's a different character. He's got a cheaply made outfit. He's hiding in alleys, no car, probably, no gadgets. He's not being bankrolled by anybody. I mean, who is he then? Is he the Punisher then? I mean, what is he?
Maybe he's Matt Murdock. Maybe he's running around in the
Interesting.
streets of Gotham with like just the gadgets that he has, and just the abilities he has. I there's a lot to go into with his wealth and his privilege as well that makes him a fascinating character, because I mean he could easily do something else with his wealth other than run around in a bat suit and buy all of these gadgets and run through the streets of Gotham, punching lower level thugs at night. He could
Right.
be taking that money and putting it to a better use. But this is comics, and nobody buys comics to watch a guy, you know, do philanthropic work.
Right.
um, so, but that's part of why I immediately push back at people that are like, "This is for adults." No, if this is a well balanced adult, that wouldn't be his idea to go. I'm going to dress up as a bat and start beating up people. That's not what an adult would do. That is a concept that is straight out of a children's book. It's out of a comic book. It's fantastical.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, you can't say that this is for us, because what adult would think that way?
Right. Uh, there does seem to be two different Batmans here. The one that you mentioned, who was the swashbuckler, and he was, look at the old Batman from the 50s and 60s, where he's got the big white eyes, and they really family friendly the character up in terms of his appearance and everything. And Robin's smiling all the time, and it's all well and good, and they're all real comic booky and very much for kids. And then 1986 hits, like you said before, The Dark Knight Returns. Dude, I was 13 in 86, and I remember when this book came out, and it was like the most groundbreaking thing at that time that I had ever seen. I had never seen a comic book get close to what Frank Miller did with that, and it was shocking actually to read it. And Frank Miller did the same thing with Daredevil and Born Again. Just an amazing book, an amazing read. I'm going to throw this at you, and I don't know how you feel about this. Did Frank Miller change it for the better or the worse or both? You think maybe a little bit of both?
I think there's nuance there. I think that he changed what Batman as a character in the comics could be, and I think he opened a world of possibilities for creators. But the problem with that is there is another lane of the world that is not as imaginative as creators are, and that's the fans. The fans will look at this and go, "This is my Batman. This is the definitive Batman." But it's not. It's just a version of Batman. It's a version of Batman in a dystopic future, and he has done everything there is to done. He's experienced all of this trauma that Batman in present day has not. And so that's the great thing about Elseworld books and miniseries. You can do stuff that you might not be able to do in regular series. And I think in that way it's still very groundbreaking. But when you get people that are like, this is my Batman, that's the definitive Batman. No. No.
I mean, that's no more the definitive Batman than the animated series, which I would argue maybe is the definitive Batman. But that's still one creative team's view on what Batman is. I mean, and I love the animated series. Bruce Timm is the man. Paul Dini, obviously. But again, that's one creative team. That's not the same creative team that's doing Justice League or doing the Killing Joke. I mean, we can't not mention Alan Moore here in terms of getting your hands on a character and making him your own and putting him through hell. I mean, the Killing Joke did that for sure. I mean, it's I don't know, dude. I'm with you. I don't know if there is a definitive anything. You can say, well, this is the definitive Batman. Sure, and for that period of time, yes, you're right. But for all
Yeah.
time, I don't know.
I think that there is an amalgam of all of the takes that you can get a definitive idea of what his character should be. But at the end of the day, we're still basing that off of what is my preferred take on the character and what is my interpretation of what he should be. And for everybody that you talk to, that's going to be different, and that's what's so great about being a fan of something and reading comics, or taking in this medium from something else. For some people, their definitive Batman might be Adam West. Who knows? That's just
Right.
the beauty of how people are introduced to his character.
Did you ever get into the 1960s show with Adam West?
I was a big fan of the Adam West show. I used to watch it
Yeah.
because at that point it was in syndication, and when I was a kid, we didn't have cable, so um, I used to come home and I used to watch it because they show like 2 episodes during the day on like whatever local channel here, and so I used to watch it a ton. I loved it. That I want to say that was my first introduction to Batman, other than the Tim Burton movie.
I watched it as well all the time, and I loved it too. And the car was awesome. The Batcave was great. As a kid, I was calling it out on its ridiculousness, though, because I knew it was ridiculous. I remember, I'll never forget this, the episode where the Joker broke into Wayne Manor, stately Wayne Manor, and he somehow found the Shakespeare head. You pop the head back, there's the button, it opens the bookcase. He slides down the bat pole, and when he gets to the bottom, he's still the Joker. And so they grab him because he doesn't really know where he's at or whatever. And Robin looks at Batman and says, or his Dick looks at Bruce and he goes, "Good thing we had the suits getting cleaned." Because in other words, Joker would have slipped into a suit going down the bat pole. I'm like, okay. So much of that show was so cornball, man.
But see, that's the thing that I think is so great about that show, is that it's just fun, and it pokes fun at
Mm,
itself. It's not trying to be this serious, dark content like Dark Knight might maybe, or Dark Knight Rises, or
right.
some of the other stuff we've seen. And like I said, that's why I enjoyed it as a kid. I mean, even as an adult, I would watch it sometimes and laugh at it. I used to love to watch the '60s movie just to laugh at it, just
Oh
like the shark
man.
repellent, or of course the iconic him running down the boardwalk with that bomb. It's just hilarious. It's just
Right.
hilarious to watch. And I mean, you see stuff where they are embracing it, like they had the 1960s comic for a while,
Yeah.
and they did the Brave and the Bold cartoon that is like has a lot of the same tones to it, and that's why I'm like, there's no definitive Batman. He can be so many different things than just this dark character. He can be whatever the imagination wants him to be. It's still in the
Mhm.
confines of Bruce Wayne and his motives to be Batman.
I mean, I guess there is a world in which we can, and I'm sure this has already been done because we're talking a lot about whether it's Batman 66 and they embraced that Batman for the modern era and did something different. There is a reality here we could talk about where it's like, yes, he went through trauma. Yes, he went through hell. But guess what? Alfred was a great father figure. He had all the money in the world to help if he needed therapy. Maybe he got therapy. Maybe we don't ever hear about that or read about it. Maybe he is fairly well adjusted for a bachelor. He just really wants to do this. He just really wants to help. I mean, dude,
Yes.
if you put a positive spin on this, he suddenly doesn't sound so sick and twisted and psychotic. He sounds like, yeah, I may be punching dudes in the face, but I mean, my heart's in the right place. I'm genuinely trying to help people.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. You could do so many cool things. There are so many hokey things that I enjoy Batman in. I mean, Super Friends. I used to love Super Friends.
Yeah.
Using that. And so there's so many things that you could do with Batman that are not this. And that's why I just don't understand people that are like, he has to be this dark, mature character for us adults. He doesn't. He can be anything. And I mean, when I think of all of the things that I've enjoyed Batman in, and that's not to say I don't enjoy the Burton movies, I don't enjoy, the Nolan movies. I do enjoy those things, but I can also enjoy these other things as well.
So we've barely scratched the surface here, and we've got a lot more stuff to jump into. But my mind's all over the place as we're talking. We mentioned Snyder before, and we have covered the Snyderverse here on the pod, and it's not always been great, kids. I don't. I personally don't think we've been unfair. I don't believe that at all. Maybe someone would counter me and say we're dead wrong. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, every universe got his own fans. I mean, people spent money to watch those movies. It's not like they didn't make any money at all. Um, but people appreciate what Snyder did. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, and it's a big question that maybe needs a big answer. Why does Batman need to kill? And why is Zack Snyder and some of those guys obsessed with, well, no, my Batman kills. These guys we need to be realistic and play this for what it is and put them in the real world. Why does Batman need to murder? And doesn't that betray everything this character stands for?
I personally am of the belief that Batman should not murder. I again, these are subjective takes. These are preferred takes on the character. But for
Mhm.
my preference, I've always liked the idea that Bruce understands what death does. He understands more than anyone how much a death can change someone's life. And so he would not just kill. Even
Yeah,
if it was his last resort, he wouldn't kill. I that's just the same with he wouldn't use guns. I don't think that he should ever want to touch a gun because a gun changed his entire life. And so
very true.
for my preferred take, I don't think that he should use guns. And I've seen so many great things written about his refusal to use guns. I've seen so many takes in other mediums where he does other things, and there's a compelling way to write him again in a dark way and have a line. Um, I can't remember the Batman animated thing they did. There was an anthology with Batman shorts in it, and they
Mhm.
were all done kind of like the Animatrix thing.
Right.
I cannot remember the name of it, but it came out around the same time as Dark Knight,
I know what you're talking
and
about. Yeah.
there were all these like great shorts in it. And one of them is he went down into the sewer and he's trying to do something in the sewer, and he at the end of it he finds all these guns in the sewer and he's trying to take them up with him. And at the end of the short, he has the decision to make to try and get out of the sewer. But when the last shot of it is him holding all these guns, and he cannot take them all up with him. And I just think it was just so beautifully done, and it's just such a great visual for who he is as a character. And that's why I mean, there's so many things you can do other than go, okay, well, he had this dark thing happen to him, so he has to be a murderer. No, no, you don't have to do that.
Because at the end of the day, he's not Frank Castle. He's not. I mean, if you really wanted to get down to the intricacies of this, which I think we've either touched on or we're vastly approaching at this point, you know, a young boy's parents getting killed is not the end of his life. It's not. It's not. It, will he go through trauma? Of course he will. When you look, as I said before, it's painful, guys. My God, if you've lost someone, you know what I'm talking about. It's extraordinarily hard to come back from that. It really is. But he's a young kid. His entire life is ahead of him. Plenty of time to get it right or to not get it right, but time to learn from your own mistakes, to somehow overcome this with the support of therapy, with whatever family's left, with friends, with teachers, with even the church, if that's what the kid is being raised in. There's a support system, hopefully, to get that kid on the right track. When you're Frank Castle, you're a grown man. You've lived your life. You have lived your life. You may not be 60 or anything, but you're 30, mid 30s, whatever he is when it happens. Your life is set. You've got a wife and two great kids. They're the light of your life, and they're taken from you. I can see. I don't want to say I can see because I'm not going to sit here and advocate for a man to go wipe people out with a weapon. But the Frank Castle bit kind of makes more sense than the Bruce Wayne bit does in terms of the
Yeah.
trauma. Maybe I'm off base here, but dude, it almost feels like sometimes people want to turn Batman into the Punisher, and I'm just like, it's two totally different sets of, or it's two different origin stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Gotham Knights. That's the animated
That's
short
it.
that was
That's
trying.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, Gotham Knights. Really good. If anybody listening hasn't watched it, really, really good. It's like set in between Batman Begins and Dark Knight. Um, but yeah, I do think that there's this idea that people want to mold him into what they think his his means for solving the crime in Gotham would be. And Punisher is a very distinct character. I mean, I joked about uh, Matt earlier, but Daredevil's a distinct character. He
Mhm.
has his own distinct way of doing things. He has his own distinct motives. And I just don't think that you have to try and mold those things into Batman just because I saw it somewhere else, or I'm sitting like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Why won't he just kill Joker? Joker's gotten out. He's done enough bad things at this point. Just kill him. There's a storied reason why he won't kill him. And just like I said earlier, the serial nature of comics is why he won't kill him because he has to exist for him as a foil in comics. He's too popular of a villain to just completely take off the table.
And Joker wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in Frank Castle's world. That dude's dead.
Yes.
I mean, dead. I mean, no chance. Batman's rogues galleries don't know how lucky they are and how good they have it because they don't want to be. Frank Castle doesn't have a rogues gallery because all of them are dead at this point. Jigsaw, I don't even know if Jigsaw's still alive in the books. I have no idea. But like for the most part, these guys are dead because he doesn't. He's not playing. He's not playing games. Um, dude, what about the idea of, and we've heard the Joker himself in the books and the movies. Heath Ledger did it. Other writers have done it with the characters. What about the idea of, well, without Batman, there's no Joker. Batman was kind of the guy to kind of come out. And I mean, this city, Gotham, it's a cesspool. It's like New York in the worst possible way, just overrun with bad, bad people. And it's a toilet. Gotham's a toilet on its worst day. On its best day, it's a toilet. But like, there weren't like costume villains running around, but there were after Batman. So what about the idea of he's like to blame for all the costume stuff that happened after he showed up?
I like the idea that they're linked. I like the idea that because Batman exists, there will always be another bigger threat to come along. It's just
Mhm.
like once you introduce um, once you introduce nuclear warfare to international stage, then everybody's going to up the gamut. Everybody's going to get bigger and bolder. And it's like if the cops take on this kind of deterrent for criminals, then criminals are going to take it to this level. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So like it's sort of a game of one-upsmanship. Well, if he gets that gun, I got to get a bigger gun. That kind of thing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. I can see that. Batman on his own, again, obsessive, compulsive. He is driven, incredibly ambitious. This mission, and I said, we said the word mission, but that's Frank Castle, obviously, as well. But with two different outcomes, he's not exactly the guy that you would imagine plays well with others. But we continue to see the Batman affiliated with the Justice League. We continue to see him that way in the cartoons, in the books, in the movies. He's the one guy that you would think would have nothing to do with working with anybody else. Yet the powers that be at DC insist on this guy being part of a team. Dude, does that begin to destroy, I don't want to say reality because we're talking about a fictional character here. Does that begin to destroy the believability of some of this, or the appreciation when you got to see him fighting crime with Superman? Like, does that hit you weird at all, or are we just so used to it now it doesn't even phase us?
No, I think it works. I mean, I think there was a great scene in New Frontier when they did the animated version of it based off
Mm-hmm.
of the book, where Batman had realized I've gone too far because he's in that he went to save someone and he scared them.
Yeah, the kid.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think the idea that um Robin, or Superman for that matter, and all these people that he has come in contact with throughout the superhero community, they make him a better hero and they make him a softer hero. I really like the concept of that. Um, and I like the idea that he is so respected with no powers that they want to work with him, and he works alongside of these people that could destroy him with a flick of their finger. Um, and I like that. I like that he again, he's this symbol of human ingenuity. He is this guy that just has his wits and, of course, his money and all these gadgets, and he could be seen as their colleague.
On the same level, if not above them, in terms of his intelligence, anyway. It is an interesting dichotomy to see him at the big round table or the big oval table, and like there's all these other guys and gals and capes and powers and meta abilities and all this other stuff they can do, and Superman can just crush all of them with a with his pinky. They're all dead, but yet Batman's sitting there chilling because he knows he's. I mean, all right. So the popular opinion out there is if Batman has time to plan, he can beat anybody. He always has an exit strategy. He knows how to get in, he knows how to get out because he's just that freaking smart. He has to be in a universe full of superpowered beings, and some of his best friends are superpowered beings. But, we all know the story, or at least most of us do, that he had the means or the ways to kill every member of the Justice League just in case he needed to. Just in case, fools got to step into him, he could take care of them. One of my favorite all time books I've ever read is when they all discover and they're shocked. They're appalled that he would have this on a hard drive. He's like, I need to be able to take you people out if you become a problem. That's the best thing ever, man. So good.
That's Tower of Babel, right?
Yes, yes.
But see, that always made sense for his character. He is the guy that prepares for everything. He is the guy that is not just preparing for everything. He's the guy that is paranoid. He's like,
Yep.
no, they could always go south. This doesn't mean I don't trust you, but I have to cover my bases, and that has always made sense to me. And that is a nuanced take. But again, a nuanced take in the hands of fans is different because then you get fans that are like, oh, he can beat everybody, or oh, he doesn't trust anybody, so he would make plans. And no, 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 there's a difference between him saying I have a plan for all of you and implementing it. um and I think some fans get that confused. I mean, he still is a human being, he still bleeds. So yes, he might have a plan for all of these guys, he might have a way to deter them, but using it is a different thing.
Right. Man, so we mentioned Superman once or twice here. Ever since Frank Miller, there has been, I'm sorry, I'm blaming Frank for this flat out. Uh, what is this? It's, again, Phil, the word obsession with me. I'm obsessed with using the word obsession, kids. What's this obsession with, well, Superman and Batman are going to fight at some point. They just gotta. I'm thinking, why? How many of us were sitting back going, well, Iron Man and Cap got to fight. They just gotta. No, they don't. That was one storyline And they've butted heads over the years in the books because of differences or whatever. The villain was mind controlling him. And of course, that's going to happen in every other book, especially in the 70s. But why is it that Superman and Batman have to fight each other? I'll never understand why. Is it because they're the big two in that publisher or what?
Um, I think I think there are reasons why they would fight. And see, the other reason that I think is interesting that he would be a part of Justice League is, um, he brings humanity to the table that some of these other guys might not. I mean, yes, there's a humanity to Superman. There's humanity to Wonder Woman as well, but I think he brings a different moral compass to that team that no one else would.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that in some ways, Batman and Superman are on two different sides um, of a coin in terms of morality. They're on two different sides of coin um, in terms of upbringing. We're talking about a guy that has been a silver spoon guy that's always had money. We're talking about a guy that grew up on a farm. So they're on two totally different sides of the class system. And so there are interesting stories to tell about that and how they would butt heads and how they would come against each other. What I don't like, and this is probably what you mean when you're blaming Frank, is I don't like that there's always this idea that Superman's just this milk toast Boy Scout,
Yep.
and if given a chance, Batman would beat the crap out of him. All he needs is a little kryptonite, and he'd beat him with his bare hands. No, no, no. In a real fight, Superman would kill him.
Yeah, without prejudice. He's gone. Yeah. Yeah.
If this is a matter of Clark can't control himself and he's mind controlled, he would kill him. Clark with restraint, maybe, but even Clark with restraint, he doesn't stand a chance. Like, yeah, he can prepare and he can weaponize himself and he can he could probably slow down Superman and you know contain him, but like in a all out fight, because that's the thing that people forget about Dark Knight Returns. He lost that fight.
Very
He went
true.
into that fight with the plan to fake his death.
Yep, very true. And it worked until
Yeah.
Frank brought him back. Hoy. Did you read The Dark Knight Strikes Again?
Yes.
What'd you think about that compared to the other? Because I was
I
not a huge
I
fan of it.
I don't like Strikes Back. I don't like what they did with Dick Grayson in that book. I
Yeah.
don't like it.
I wasn't a fan of that either. But yeah, they do seem like he and Soup seems like two sides of the same coin, and like their methods are different. The end game for them, no pun intended, the end game for these characters is the same. They're just trying to protect people and let the good guy win and make sure everybody's safe. But their ways of getting there, which Superman has always been highly critical of. But in the real world setting, kids, Batman's a murderer, more than likely, maybe, and Superman's definitely a killer because why not? Because he can kill anybody he wants to. So maybe it's a good thing these are all fictional characters we're talking about here today. Um, but yeah, do just this idea of well, they had to butt heads. People tend to forget that World's Finest was a comic that ran for a really long time, in which they worked together in every issue on the same side. But
Yeah.
we
I
just forget that, dude.
I think there are ways you can have them butt heads and still come together and work. I think that's why, the world's finest episodes of the Batman animated series and Superman animated series were so great. And then you get Justice League that came out of that. I think all of that stuff is a great depiction of Batman. I think some of the best depiction of Batman that I've ever seen come from the animated series and the Justice League show. Um, there's so many great things centered around their relationship from those shows that is so cool to watch. I mean, and I think that there are a lot of things about Batman that they get right too. I still think one of the coolest things I see this clip pop up on Twitter all the time is the scene from the epilogue of Justice League Unlimited where Batman goes in and Aces is going to die. Like the kid is going to die, and he goes and sits with the kid until she's gone. He doesn't go in there and kill her. He tells her like, I didn't plan to come in here and kill you. I just came in here to be with you until it was over. And I
Yeah.
mean, every time I've watched that scene, I get emotional watching it. But that's who Batman is to me. He's not a guy that's going to take extremes. He's not a guy that is just, dark for the sake of being dark. He's a guy that something very terrible happened to him, and he decided, I won't let this happen to anybody else, especially a kid.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's who we should be talking about. I think this needs to be, again, the trauma and all that stuff, the obsession, all that stuff. He's driven, of course, all that's 100% true, but he's a grown man. And he knows that if he starts killing people and taking it to the extreme, he's going to have just as much blood on his hands as the guy that took his parents from him. So he would use common sense. And plus, why would the underworld fear him after that? If he were to cross the line, well, of course, Tom, because now they know he'll just kill him. Would it be fear, or would it be more like, he's no better than we are? You know what I mean? Like, well, the the gloves are off now. We'll do whatever we got to do. If he's going to come for us like that, we'll do whatever we want to do now. Would it backfire on him?
Yeah, I mean, I just think based on who he is, there are just certain lines he wouldn't cross, and that's just the way I see him as a character. Um, yeah, some people aren't going to agree with that, but it does just that again. It's subjective.
Yeah. We got to talk about Batman in Hollywood. I don't think we can talk about this character, not just reference the books. We got to talk about Hollywood. Phil, why is it? And you said it several episodes ago that it shouldn't be this hard to get Superman right. Um, why is it that they can get Batman right in very short spurts, but once you get past the second movie, no matter what you're talking about, when you're going long term game playing, you can't get him right. I mean, we saw it with the Chris Nolan trilogy. We saw it with the the Tim Burton trilogy. I don't know if we ever got Affleck the way we wanted to see him in the Zack Snyder stuff. Why is it that they can get Batman right in short spurts in one shots, but anything past a second movie, it tends to fall apart? Why is that?
Why? I think because that's what Hollywood is on some levels. They want to do surface level stuff. They don't want to actually get into like the actual core of a character for the most part. And then once they do, they only do it in small doses. I'm going to throw a hot take out here.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had a great depiction of Batman in Hollywood yet. I think we've had some good depictions, but I don't think we've had a great one. Not in a sense of like I would say I think we've had a great depiction of Captain America. He's
Yes.
not he's not he's not specifically everything you would get from the books, but I think he is truly great. It's the same thing with Iron Man. I don't think Tony Stark in the comics and Tony Stark in the movies are not necessarily the same, but I think we've had a truly great Tony Stark in Robert Downey Jr. I don't think we've had a truly great live action Batman yet.
Who got close? Who got the closest?
I would say Keaton got the closest.
Hmm.
Um, there are certain things I like about Christian Bale's Batman, but it misses the mark in some ways for me. And I mean, the Keaton version misses the mark in some ways for me. There is no, like I said, there is no truly perfect depiction of him. But I think for me, Keaton is the closest in terms of like what the dichotomy of the character is. I think his crime alley scenes, for example, in the first movie, are so good.
Hmm.
Um, his some of his scenes in Batman Returns are very close. I mean, in some ways, I really think Christian Bale and Batman Begins is extremely close. It's very very close, but
Yeah.
it kind of got lost in the second movie of that franchise.
Yeah. I mean, and talk about hot takes. You hit Twitter with a hot take in terms of the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight versus Spider-Man 2 in terms of what the better flick is, and why it's absolutely Spider-Man 2. I mean, dude, there is, and you said this off mic before, that there is a reverence for the Dark Knight that, and like you said, it's all subjective. People can love whatever they want. It's perfectly fine. But it's almost like people talk about the Dark Knight in hushed tones as if it's a masterpiece of storytelling. And I really enjoyed the movie. But if you'd said right now, Tom, hit me with your top 5 greatest comic book films, there's a hot take from me. I don't know if it's top 5. Dude, we've got an entire Marvel universe now that I can put top 5 in my own personal opinion. I mean, Superman, the first Superman maybe will always be number 1. I personally think Black Panther is tremendous. I think Endgame is tremendous. I love the Avengers movie. Dude, I don't know if it fits in the top 5, man, for me. So what about the idea that Dark Knight is treated like it's, holy ground when maybe people are going a little bit too overboard with this?
I think a lot of the talk around Dark Knight has gotten extremely pretentious. I think it has, and I think part of me putting that hot take out that was right before we recorded the Spider-Man 2 episode, and I had just watched it. And Spider-Man 2 is one of those movies where every time I watch it, I there's just I love it every time. Like there's pure joy. There's a certain amount of comic movies that make me feel like this like kid like joy. Like Rocketeer is like that for me. I don't care how many
Oh,
times I've
yeah.
seen Rocketeer. I love it. And there are just so many comic book movies that I feel like fit that joy of what it's like to enjoy comics as a medium and to lose yourself in the fantasy of these things. And I think a part of why Dark Knight misses the mark for me, and not to say that I don't love Dark Knight, I do. I went to see it first night when it came out. I live in Chicago. I used to work right next door to where the Bat Pot scene was shot.
Oh,
Um, all of this stuff, like him going down Financial District. I used to work on Financial District, so um, I love those movies. I love Nolan movies. But in terms of comic book movies and what I appreciate about the medium and genre films is that they are what they are, and I feel like Batman Dark Knight, it tries to be so much more than that. It tries to be this high cinema experience for people that are not into comic book movies, and that's just not my it's not my bag. And
right.
I mean, like I said, it's good. It's still a good movie, but I mean, there's certain things about the movie that I feel like if he had not tried to make it so grounded, it would have been even better. Um, And man, it's just so many people that look at it like, oh, this is an Oscar worthy movie. This is a movie that fits in this prestige with these movies over here. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not why we enjoy these things. I don't read Batman comic books because I want it to be considered a part of the Pulitzer Prize list or the best selling list. Like that's not why we get into these things.
Yeah, it's for the action adventure, the zam, pow, bang, and the special effects.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
look, these things can be deeper than fight scenes, and that's why, like I said, there are certain, mature takes that are great. But I think once you get into this conversation of, oh well, Dark Knight is deeper than Spider-Man 2 because it has all these themes. It's like knock it off. There are themes to every movie. If you do your job right as a storyteller, then there are things that you can take from anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you can, yeah, for sure. You can get something out of it. I've been watching Batman Begins as we've recorded this whole show. I honestly don't think that Christian Bale gets enough credit for the stuff he did as Bruce, because you would think on one hand, well, Bruce Wayne would be completely dialed in. He would know I have to be this obnoxious, womanizing, Tony Stark times 10, uh, which Tony wasn't trying. That's what he actually was. It's so funny because Tony was Bruce Wayne, the Bruce Wayne persona who became a hero. but Bruce Wayne's already hero who has to pretend like he's Bruce Wayne. It's so odd, the dichotomy here between these two characters. What about the comparisons that people have made? And I'm sure a lot of it has come because of the MCU. The idea of Tony Stark being compared to Bruce Wayne. Where does that work for you and where does it not work?
I think that there are interesting characteristics between both, and why they are just so totally different characters. We had we had we watched Bruce go through something very traumatic early on in his life, and Iron and Tony did not go through that until later on in his life.
Right.
And we've seen him go through traumas that are very different from Bruce's traumas. And because of that, there are certain things that Tony would do as a character that Bruce would never do. Like Bruce would never profit off the sales of guns. Never. That's
Right.
just not something he would ever do. Um, and but Tony, his moral compass is different because of where he came from. And I think Tony looks at things in a very logical way. He looks at things in a very pragmatic way. And Batman is sometimes a pragmatic character as well, but there's a lot of heart to Batman's character as well. That he is just doing things. All he might do things that are logic, but he's also doing things based off of his gut and his intuition.
And that circles back to something I was going to throw at you as well. Um, the idea of the Dark Knight. That's great. The Dark Knight, the Cape Crusader, that kind of thing. But the Dark Knight detective, the idea that there's no cop on the Gotham PD, no detective behind the desk that's smarter than this guy. Because again, he obsesses over it. While these detectives, a lot of them go home to their families, their wives or their husbands or whatever, and their kids. Bruce is going home to nobody. So he's got all the time in the world to get to learn this and to get extremely good at it, to school himself, to educate himself on the human mind, on the human condition, to know how these things work, how psychosis works, to trace criminals, to capture them, to help capture them, whatever. And of course, he's going, again, obsessed. He's going to become an expert at this. What about the idea, Phil, that the Dark Knight detective, in my opinion, that's one of the most intriguing parts of this guy, that you could read a whole book where he doesn't punch anybody. And a Batman film doesn't have to be him throwing the Joker through a plate glass window. It could just be he's using his detective skills. Do you think we're going to get that? Speaking of Hollywood, do you think we're going to get that in a movie? Will we get it with the next Batman, Robert Pattinson? What do you think?
I think that somebody is going to eventually write the detective Batman movie that I would like to see. Um, I mean, that's going back to what we said about Dark Knight. I mean, I was surprised when I tweeted that. There were a lot of people that, of course, disagree with me, and there were a lot of people that were rude. But there were a lot of people that actually had like interesting conversations with me after it. Like, I saw a lot of people that were saying they thought Batman Begins is a better movie than Dark Knight. I don't hear a lot of people say that, but there are a lot of people that say that. I mean, when I think about it now, um, when Dark Knight Rises came out, I did one of those things where you go in and you get a ticket and you do the marathon. So I've sat in a movie theater through all three Nolan Batman movies. Um,
So how they play back to back to back like that?
like they play one and then they give you like maybe like a short
Oh
intermission
yeah, yeah. How
in
do they play
between.
for you though? Watching all three of them in a consecutive
At,
row like that.
at the time, I forgot how good Batman Begins is. I really enjoyed Batman Begins when I
So
saw it
good.
before Dark Knight. And I think the first two movies lead into each other really, really well. And I think, of course, like Dark Knight Rises is like the like the worst of the three. And
Yeah.
I mean, even at the time, I enjoyed Dark Knight Rises for what it was. But seeing them all in one sitting is very interesting. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in at once. But yeah, I mean, man, I think one day someone's gonna get the detective stuff right. They're gonna get all of the gravitas right, like I want it to be. But that's just my opinion. To me, like I've told you off mic, I think that Mask of the Phantasm is still the best Batman movie of all time.
Right. Oh, what did they do in that film that makes it so good? Wow. What is it that they've done? Is there something that they did with him, with the story that no one else seems to have been able to capture? Because I'm with you, I love that film. But what is it that they did that maybe no one else has been able to do with him yet?
I think that they capture Bruce's decision to be Batman better than any other movie has, and I think his conflicted decision to be Batman in that movie is handled very, very well. I think you get the great scene where he goes to his parents' grave and he's telling them like, "Look, I promised that, but I didn't know I would be happy. I didn't know that I could move on with my life, and you got to let me let this go because I want to be happy."
Right.
And I want to get the girl. I want to have all of these things that I didn't think that I can have before. And of course, it doesn't work out with the girl, and he goes back to the mission. And then you get this other great scene of him putting on the cowl for the first time, and just how his mentality changed, and him like actually scaring Alfred when he put on the mask for the first time, which is
Right.
chef kiss. It is perfect. Again, I've never seen that depicted as well in any other medium. It's perfect.
I mean, it's kind of sad. I love that film, but I was kind of with him. Like I love Batman as the character because I'm always been a fan, dude. I really have. If I haven't bothered to say that during the duration of this show, kids, that's my fault. But I am a fan of this character. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. So I don't want to see him stop, but I kind of knew where he was coming from. Let me get past this. I want to live now. Like, is that the curse of not just Bruce Wayne, but a character that's written this way, is that he can't stop unless he's dead? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that there's this idea from Mask of Phantasm. Not that he's never meant to be happy, but I think it's the same thing that we love about Spider-Man, and that you're put in a position where you've learned more and you've had to grow up faster than most people would in your situation. And that's as a wealthy, privileged white man, you had to grow up very fast, and you had to see things that a lot of other children in your position would not have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you can do so much more than anyone else. And I think, yes, it might be a curse to go, I have to take on this mission, but there's something that you can do for the world that nobody else in your position would be able.
And this reminds me of a conversation we had a while back about, you know, this idea of, well, we should take these characters and we should modernize them, and that is to say, maybe this guy shouldn't have to be white. Why is this guy? Why can't he be a she? Why can't we? And the answer, kids, is you can do anything you want. If you're giving carte blanche with a character and the publisher of that character gives you the green light, go with God. It doesn't mean that the original character is dead. It doesn't mean you can't still enjoy the books or the movies or the cartoons. You enjoy whatever you want. It doesn't mean that they're going to destroy your childhood and all that other nonsense, hoo-ha, whatever. It just means that, people want to see themselves represented and that kind of thing. Why does it not work unless Bruce Wayne is white? Why does it not work for this character? And does this character work as female? Why does it have to be a white guy as Bruce Wayne?
Well, for me, because we saw this quite a bit, I think like maybe a year ago, where it was like, oh, why can't we just cast a black man as Batman? I don't think a black man works as Batman for a number of reasons. I think for one, Bruce comes from old money. There are no black men in this country that come from old money.
Right.
That's just not a thing. It just doesn't fit with the history of America. So in that way, it kind of has to be a white man. And then there's also the point that Batman has always made the point of not covering his entire face. And I've seen storied reasons why. I've seen, people, creators talk about why they think he doesn't cover that part of his face to show that there is some part of him that is there's still humanity there.
Mhm.
And for that reason, like if you can see that part of his face and you know that he's black, you can say that, he won't be treated differently by the world, but I don't believe that.
I don't believe
um
that either. Yeah.
I just think the very idea that there's a black man going out every night and dressing up as a bat and beating up men in the streets and then also working with the police, that just doesn't work. And not to get into some of the more you know relevant storylines going on today and some of the real life stuff going on today. I think a world where you're making Batman to this character where he works in tune with the police in the way that he does, and he's black, I don't think that necessarily works.
It's not a good look. You are dead on the money on that.
And there's a few reasons why, and that's not to say that he should hate police because he's black, but there's such a there's such a different dynamic between wealthy white men and the police and black men in general with the police. So I just don't think that relationship would be the same. And that's not to say that you could not rework it to make it work, but it just would not be the same in the way that we know that Batman is in the comics and in other iterations. I mean, in the 60s comic, in the 60s show, like we knew, he had the phone that was a direct tie to the police in his
Right.
house.
Right.
Do I think that a black man would have a direct line to the police in his house if he was a vigilante? No. No.
Oh my, I shouldn't laugh at that, but what you're saying makes sense because we either can't get past prejudice or we don't care to get past it. But the truth is, the sad truth is, Phil, we're probably never going to live in a world that, and or especially this country, that doesn't have some level of prejudice against black people. And I'm not happy about that. No one is. Well, if you are, you're part of the problem, obviously. Um, but that you're right. It wouldn't play. It wouldn't play. Um, can Batman be a woman?
um, I mean, you've got stuff like the Batwoman TV show that's on right now. You've got
Right.
other iterations of a woman taking on the mission and being like a Bat family character. Um, but I think there's a certain amount of masculinity and bravado that comes with the character. Um, that I don't know if it works as well with a woman. It's the same as when people are trying to turn Bond into a woman. Like there are certain things about Bond as a character that are linked to, machismo and, being kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a bachelor character that
Right.
doesn't necessarily work with a woman.
He's a swinger.
Yeah, he's a come on. There's certain things about it. It's just like if we decided today that Daredevil can be a woman. Yes, Daredevil can be a woman, but are we going to completely change the character of Matt Murdock? Because Matt Murdock, in his history with women, is a part of the character. It's linked to who he is.
He's a dog. He's a dog, man.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, I don't know if you could just change that and go, okay, well, we're just going to cast a woman and do a movie where a woman is Daredevil. You can, but then you're not doing a Daredevil movie at that point.
Right.
Yeah, at least you're not doing a Matt Murdock Daredevil movie.
Right, right. And he is female now in the comics. Daredevil is a woman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know who it is, but
Isn't it Elektra?
is it Elektra?
I think it is.
I was thinking it was. I'm going way back with my references. The woman who was White Tiger, I think.
Oh,
I could be wrong.
you know what? I'm not keeping up enough with the comics, but just certain things about the way that this Daredevil dresses, and she has like the scarlet
Yeah,
scarf and everything. That makes me think Elektra.
maybe that's right. Yeah, I think. Batman works in a certain way because that's just how it works. And again, kids, it was just meant to be a comic book, and now it's become so much more to so many more people. We've barely touched on the Rogues Gallery. We've barely touched on his supporting cast. Why is Alfred so essential to Bruce Wayne / Batman?
Um, because I think that he's a surrogate father in a way that Bruce needs, but he cannot replace his dad, and I don't think he ever tries to replace his dad. I think he is just like in the same way that Batman or Bruce took on this mission to do something for the greater good. I think not Arthur, but Alfred took on this role in his life of, look, I was dedicated to your parents, and in that same way, I am here for you, and maybe in more of a way than I was ever there for your parents, because they entrusted you to me. And so I
Wow,
just think
yeah.
that is just such a big part of who he is as a character. Like, he wouldn't be who he is without Alfred. I don't think. And I mean, he if he was totally alone and left to his own devices, then who knows who he would be.
Oh, good point. Yeah, who is Batman without Alfred? Great point. Is he dead? Because no one was there to stitch him up. Is he? Because Alfred, among many other things, was member of. He was. Well, it depends on what version you're reading or watching. He was a soldier in England. He was. Uh, I don't know what name all the things he's been. He's almost a doctor at some point because he's patched him up so many times over the years. I mean, he's
Yeah,
maybe a secret agent. I mean, what all?
I know he's been an actor in some portrayals, right?
That's true.
Um,
Yeah, a member of
um,
M5, I think.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, I just think it's just that he adds to his moral compass, and I think that that's one of the things that the Nolan movies got incredibly well, is that yes, Bruce has his own moral compass and he has his things, but he's still imperfect, and I think in some ways Alfred is there to rein him in when he goes too far. And I think that that is a perfect depiction of what their relationship is.
Mhm. If we've not got a great, quote unquote, great Batman on screen yet that encapsulates the character, have we had a great Alfred?
Boy, I think Michael Caine's pretty close.
Yeah.
He's great in the Nolan movies. He's truly great. Um, I mean, well, the Alfred in the Burton movies isn't. I mean, he's great in some ways as well, but I think Kane is way better than him.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I enjoy Jeremy Irons in the Snyder movie. I enjoy him as Alfred.
Yeah, Jeremy Irons does a very good job. Michael Gow, I think is how you pronounce his last name, who was, I believe, a classically trained actor. I remember he was in George C. Scott's Christmas Carol as one of the people heading up the charity in the movie. I just remember him seeing him in that, and going, "Oh my God, that's Alfred!" Like, I was very happy to see him in that. Um, I thought he was perfect at the time, anyway.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Alfred from the '60s movies and the '60s show as well. Just because it's just a nostalgia thing for me.
He looks
Um,
like your grandfather, that guy. You know?
it's just something about him. It's just something about his relationship with them in that
Yeah.
show. I just enjoy it. It's the same way that I enjoy Batgirl in that show.
Hmm. Well, Yvonne Craig was a hottie. I'm sorry. She totally was. I'm just saying. I hate to be that guy, but dude, when I was a kid, I was like, Batgirl's on. All right, let's watch this.
I'm a big fan of the '60s show. I know some people are like, it's too campy for me to enjoy it, but it might be just the age that I grew up watching it that I just enjoyed it.
In terms of love interests, I Bruce has a really hard time with this. Maybe, well, okay, Matt doesn't have a hard time with women because Matt's a dog. We've established this. That's canon, kids. It's what we call canon in this business. Matt's a dog. All right. We can't really call Bruce a dog here. He's not, because he's a lot of it's for show. It's for the press. Again, he's not really Tony Stark. Um, he has a tougher time. Vicky Vale, Kim Basinger in the Burton film. I mean, they start with Vicky Vale on the big screen, and it goes from there. I mean, I don't know. Seeing Batman with a woman just well, the Tom it has to be Catwoman. Why? Because she wears a suit too. Grow up. Who cares? Like I think that pairing him with a woman is a tough thing because he's so driven, dude. He's so committed to what he's doing. It's kind of a weird comparison, but it's like a priest can't marry because he's committed to the word of God, to serving the Lord, to doing it. And I know it's weird, but like to me, it's almost kind of the same thing. You can't expect this guy to like he would want to settle down and maybe have a normal life. He can't. Like, what about the whole him having a woman in his life? Does that work for him?
I think that there are several women that they've used in the comics and in the movies that are a great foil for him. That is again another reason why I think Mask of Phantasm is the superior Batman movie because
Mhm.
it handles his love interest in that movie so much better. Andrea is such an interesting character, and like just the way they handle their their entire romance, and then the reveal at the end that she's Phantasm, and even like the fact that they are very similar and their motives are similar, and that she went too far. It's such a good story to tell. It's
Yeah.
so good. I think the closest to a good foil for him is Selena, and I think it's not just because they're both masked characters. I think it's because um they both have experienced trauma, and they've both dealt with trauma in similar ways. Um, I I just think that there's such a good I think there's such a good relationship between them that has been handled well both in the movies and in the comics. They're I think probably the best on screen we've seen in a movie is probably Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer. I thought that was great. I thought that was the best
Mm.
live action romance stuff we've seen so far.
Oh, there's so many, cringeworthy moments in that film. I just, I thought I mean, you're right. They are a good pairing, but I don't know. And she gets enough credit, I think, for her performance in that. Some of the dialogue is a bit, ugh,
It's
just
it's it's weird.
hammy.
It's very hammy, but I think there's certain stuff like when they're in a mansion together and they are just basically like you can see like how conflicted they are. I think that stuff is good. Of course,
Mhm.
like they when he finds out that she's gonna kill Max at the party, and they have like the whole dance scene and all that stuff's great. Even when he unmasked for her later in the movie, also great. Some of the other
Right.
stuff, like them in suit and some of the sexual innuendo stuff, is kind of weird. But
Yeah.
again, we're dealing with two adults that are dressing up as animals and jumping across rooftops.
Well, if you're just gonna boil it on down and just destroy it, because you're totally right, but oh, mention it that way. Um, I'm going back to Batman Begins again because I was with you with what you said earlier. I do think it's better than Dark Knight. I actually do. Um, I'm a guy that loves this stuff being grounded in some aspect of reality. Not that Dark Knight isn't impossible to happen, but the idea that this dude dressing as a clown can the entire criminal underworld has no choice but to bow down to him. No, no, I'm not buying that. I mean, the moment he enters the room full of criminals at that table, someone's going to shoot him dead. But that doesn't happen. So I don't know. It just seems like what we saw in the first film when it was just him against street level crime. No one's wearing a suit. No one's painting their face. I don't know. It just plays more gritty. And even though there's a lot of fantastical stuff happens in this movie, like the Batmobile, the tumbler, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, shut up. But at least it's not a fast movie where it's like going up into space, right? So
Yeah, and I mean, I really enjoy Batman Begins. I really do. There's a lot of stuff about it that I feel like is closer to what I want Batman to look like on film.
Yeah.
I feel like Dark Knight kind of jumps into exposition mode. There's a lot of long talky scenes. There's a lot of um, Joker explaining his psychosis to us, and hey, that stuff is good. It's compelling. Um, but I want my Joker to have acid spewing flowers and laughing gas, and I want him to do quirky things like the laughing fish and stuff. I mean, say what you want about the Burton films, I think he handled a Joker scheme of hijacking cosmetic products and using them. That is what Joker would do.
Right.
And I think his scheme in that movie is much better than grounding it to him using bombs and knives. Anybody can use bombs and knives. Any normal villain in real life can do that. Any normal terrorist can do that. But that's not what Joker is. He's a over the top comic book movie. And I mean comic book villain. That's what I want him to be.
Yeah, he's not a dude sneaking up on chicks and making them and creeping them out. He's got a razor blade in his hand. That's not. Yeah, come on.
I
Um,
mean, and yeah, he can be that. He can be a dark and sinister character that is up close like that with a knife and a gun. But that, like I said, on some levels, I also want him to be outlandish and ridiculous too.
right. So we're going back to who's the best. Uh, who's the best Joker, and why is it Mark Hamill?
Oh man, Mark Hamill's very, very tough to beat.
Yeah.
I think it's Hamill personally. I have a soft spot for Jack Nicholson. I really like Jack Nicholson because he has all of the aesthetics that I want Joker to have. He has the purple suit. I mean, listen, you can say everything you want about that interrogation scene from Dark Knight, but Nicholson walking through that museum and dancing to Prince and
Oh,
writing Joker's here on things and spray painting the stuff in the museums, that is Joker to me. It is. And I mean, I feel like that is closer to where I want Joker to be than getting these like, hey, have I told you about these Scar stories? It's like, hey, that stuff is great, but it's a little bit too on the nose for me. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean I don't love Heath Ledger in the role. He's great. He's fantastic.
right. And the interrogation scene is straight from The Killing Joke. That's what it feels like to me.
Yes, I mean, and there are certain things from that. I understand what they're riffing off of for the movie. There are a lot of takes from like The Man Who Laughs, like Long Halloween, all of these Batman stories that I loved reading as a comic book fan, and that's why I'm saying I don't have a problem with the Heath Ledger stuff, but for me, it's Mark Hamill. I mean, there's so many different things when you think of Mark Hamill and so many different Joker episodes that are perfect. Like, I mean, the the uh the garbage boat episode where he's using the laughing cat from the garbage in a
Right.
TV show. Um, we've got all the way to the Batman Beyond movie, and what you were saying earlier about Batman and Batman is just a scared kid. When you boil him down to, he's a kid that never got past this trauma, and having Joker find out who he is in the Batman Beyond movie and go, man, I thought you were this all this time, and to find out that you're just a kid that was screaming for mommy and daddy. It's one of the greatest villain monologues I've ever seen.
It's good stuff. That's really good stuff. I'd forgotten about that actually. They're always going to be connected, these two characters. Always. And as much grief as Jared Leto gets, I can't and won't fault him for wanting to. I mean, I'm not a fly on the wall. I'd like to be. I'd love to be in on the conversation when he's first pitched this. And then you would think at some level, either he or his people or they, when they went to him, said, look, we don't want you to do Nicholson. We're not looking for Mark Hamill. We want you to do something different. We're going to put a different spin on it. You can, it's the Joker, but it's not it's your version. It's our version, I mean, how's it pitched to him? And I kind of feel bad because, no disrespect. He's not my favorite actor. Do I think he's good? I mean, I got respect for him. Do I think I mean, that's another topic, but, is he doing what he can? Yeah, I believe he probably is. He's doing what he can. I'm not a fan of it. So I kind of feel for the guy because he's got a lot to live up to. Um, Joaquin Phoenix. It's an
Yeah,
Elseworlds movie. You know, that's not. We've not even talked about that guy. I mean, dude, I've seen Joker one time. I have no plans on watching it again. It's just not. It just didn't click for me, man. You know.
I I didn't enjoy the Joker movie. I'm not a big fan of Suicide Squad either.
Yeah.
So the problem with Joker in film now is that once you turn the Ledger portrayal into the definitive portrayal and you give him an Oscar, then everybody afterwards decide I have to play the Joker this way and I have to ham it up even more past what Heath Ledger did. And it's like, no, 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 no. I don't need that. I don't need everybody to try to do this. It's just like when everybody picked up Lex Luthor after Gene Hackman. Everybody tries to do this hammy Gene Hackman impression. And it's like, no, no. Make this character your own. Do a different depiction of it.
Yeah, do your own take. Do something different. You know, if we're really going to go down that road, I will hand it to Jared Leto because at least it's different. I'm not a fan, but some people are. They have to be. Not everyone can hate this. In the Snyder cut, he looked more like the Joker, maybe, and with the long hair. But you know, that whole bit, we don't even have to talk about it, but that whole bit where he's foul mouthing Batman, and you're like, oh my god, what did he just say? Like, oh, you know. Again, but that goes back to the idea of we got to make this stuff rated R, guys. Like, yeah, what? Totally. No, you don't. Don't be stupid. Like,
Yeah.
dude, in this modern climate of where DC is, Warner Brothers is with these characters, I don't think Joker has a chance to get back to how charming Nicholson was or how entertaining Mark Hamill is. I mean, I don't think it's possible, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, there's a way to do very, very dark stuff with Joker in the movies, and there's a way to take him all the way and make him be this horrific character. Fine, but I just feel like some people that are just like, oh no, he has to be, super foul mouth. You can say so much without cursing, because like I said earlier, in the Hamill, him him going as far as to go to a low blow and talk about his parents in that way and talk about him in that way without ever cursing, I feel like that's dark. Like that's low.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and do like toilet talk. You don't have to do stuff like talk about reach arounds and stuff. Like that's
Oh my
like I feel
God.
like that's low brow and it that's what makes it so funny is that some people think that it's such an intelligent take because it isn't. It's lazy.
Yeah. It is
Anybody
lazy.
can add cursing to anything. Any teenager can write a dark monologue and add all this cursing and stuff in there. That doesn't make it smart.
Right. It is lazy storytelling. I'm with you 100%. Um, yeah, I keep going back to the idea that Joker and Batman don't exist without each other. I personally love the Killing Joke. Yes, I love Dark Knight Returns. You're crazy if you don't. I mean, it's classic. I love the Killing Joke. Batman Year One, which Batman Begins essentially is Batman Year One in a lot of different ways. Um,
Yeah.
what's some of your favorite? I'm not going to ask you for your all time favorite, but what's some of your favorite Batman stories? You can count the movies as well.
Um, like I said, I think Mask of Phantasm is like one of my favorite
Mhm.
movies. Um, in terms of comic books, I mean, like you said, I mean, Long Halloween is up there. I love Long Halloween. Uh, I love the sequel. Was it Dark Victory? Uh, Killing Joke is up there for me. I wouldn't put it as high as Long Halloween. Like Long Halloween might be one of my favorite all time. Year One is up there. Um, Batman Broken City is up there. It's like a mini series as well.
Mhm.
Um, man, there are so many like um comic runs. Like I mentioned earlier, the Scott Snyder stuff is great. Some of the Grant Morrison stuff is really good. Um, when we go into comics, there's so many Batman comics that I've read over the years. I mean, once you get into like today, when you get all the collective versions that are like in Barnes and Nobles, like I said, it's tougher to get better than Long Halloween because it's so accessible and it's so concise in what it in the story it tells, and what it is for just that miniseries, and it handles all of the detective stuff well. It handles all of the rogue gallery well. It's tough to beat. Like I said, it's almost perfect. Hush is up there. I really enjoy Hush.
Oh, so good. I was just gonna say Hush. I love that story.
Um, yeah, there's this is why I push back at some people that are like, oh well, you say this, and I mean, don't get me wrong, Spider-Man is the man. I love Spider-Man, but there is so much Batman comics and Batman medium out there that I enjoy. And I love this character. I just don't love everybody's overinflated opinion of this character.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I'm also with you on the fact that there have been so many great stories. For some reason, Detective Comics around issue 600 was really good for me. It was called Blind
Oh,
Justice. Oh,
yes, there's oh man, I mean Gotham Central as well. So good.
oh, so
That's
good. Yeah.
that's what I wanted the Gotham TV show to be. Um Yeah, there's a run of the detective book where Paul Dini wrote a few issues of it. So
Mhm.
so good. There's like the Joker issue where Joker kidnaps Robin, and it's so good. Man, there was a really really good Detective Comics run. I can't remember who wrote it, but there other than Paul Dini, but there was another one that was really really good. Yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton of stuff because there's so much good Batman comics out there.
It's funny. We're touching on the ancillary characters around him. We've not discussed Robin a lot. Who's your favorite Robin?
It used to be Dick Grayson because he's like the Robin. Like his story is so close to what Bruce's was, and he is in a lot of ways what Bruce would have been if somebody who was a real father stepped in and got his arms around him earlier in life.
Good
And
call.
and I've seen some people that say that Dick, when he becomes Batman, is a better Batman, but he's a better Batman because he saw everything that Bruce went through, and Bruce taught him better. He did everything for him that nobody did for him,
Right.
and so yeah, it's in a lot of ways I feel like he's like the perfect Robin, but I also feel like he's outgrown Robin. He's his own character now, and so that's why I don't see him as Robin anymore. He's Nightwing. He's he's his own person. Um, I really like Damian Wayne. I think he is just, I think he's such a perfect little jerk, and like he's everything that all the other Robins are not. He's just great, and I like the idea of a Robin being too far gone and Batman having to rein him in because we're used to it being the opposite.
Of course. Yeah. That's funny. Uh, I, I don't know. I love Tim Drake. I remember when they first introduced Tim Drake, dude, the explosion that happened in the books was awesome. Like, I mean, I bought up the issues not because I was thinking this was going to be worth a lot of money. We all went through that in the 90s, kids. In case you don't know, now you know. None of it was real, just saying. But I was really interested to see what they were going to do with a new kid as Robin. And the costume got an update so much better than, green shorts and little green boots with wings on them. I mean, so much better.
Pixie boots.
Yes, Pixie. Yes, my God. But the new suit was awesome. And Tim Drake, there's a lot to be said for that character. He's probably, I don't know, it seems like he's the more well grounded of all the Robins that we've gotten so far?
Yeah, I really like Tim Drake as a character. He's really close. I for me, I think Damien's my favorite Robin. But Tim Drake's a close second. He's a great character.
And, there's always going to be jokes about Bruce and Dick and Batman and Robin, all that stuff. And for anybody that's ever had a chuckle or a cheap laugh, because everyone's 16 in their heads for some reason, over the idea of, well, this kid's living with this guy. All right. I mean, dude, this has been going on for years. What's the book? Seduction of the Innocent by Dr. Frederick Wortham. I still remember all that he wrote in the 50s, I think, that basically said that the reason for all juvenile delinquency was comic books, because apparently all kids read comics. They all chewed gum, but evidently that didn't do anything to make them criminals. It was the comic books. So Batman and Robin had to, it affected the books. The Comics Code Authority was introduced, and they had to separate, and they did all this other stuff, and they're trying to, well, he's just a kid. He's his ward and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right. I mean, just again, this was just made for kids. We're coming full circle here at the end of the show, but it's like I love the characters, I do, but I love them as a kid. I love them as adult, and in the right hands, it can speak to all ages. Why does Batman in the right hands speak to all ages, and why is he effective to all ages of an audience, do you think?
Just because I think he speaks to a part of the world that, when you think of it, like I said, a guy that takes a stand, can do more. You can always do more. You can always take a stand, and you can be more than just a man. You can be more than just some wealthy guy that just is a, social deviant or whatever. And to your point, you know, when you put these things in the hands of adults, I feel like when you try to make things too adult, it loses innocence. There's something innocent to, the idea that Bruce saw this kid lose both of his parents at the same time, and he was looking at it like, this happened to me, and I want to take this kid in, and I want to give him a life that he couldn't have. It's not just that I'm giving him a life outside the fact that he lost his parents, but I'm giving him a life that he wouldn't have had anyway because he came up growing up in a circus. I'm giving him a life where he can be whoever he wants to be. Even if you don't want to be Robin, you don't want to, you know, put on a mask. I'm putting you in a situation where you could grow up and be in the best schools. You can go to college. I can give you a future.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people to take that and go, well, it's just it's gay, or it's pedophilia. No, it doesn't have to be that. It can be just that there's humanity to this. But that's just how, adults think about things. Adults think about things in a perverse way because at some point we don't believe in things like superheroes or that everybody is doing things out of the goodness of their heart. And there's a reason for that, of course, because, that is the adult world. But not everything had to grow up and be tainted that way.
Right. Not everyone has a motive. And I mean, yeah, in real life, maybe you can question, but not everyone has to have a motive in a freaking comic book, for God's sake.
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying, not everything needs to grow up. Not everything does. And I mean,
Right.
that's a point of the magic of comics. That's a part of immersing yourself in this world where a man can make a difference by dressing up as a bat. It isn't just that a man, can decide, oh, I can make a difference in this kid's life because, oh, I'm bringing him in because, I'm grooming him. No, I'm making a difference in this kid's life because no one did that for me.
Right. Yeah, there's something to be said for that, and it's um, again the whole concept of this guy's going to carry a shield. This guy's going to wear a suit of armor like the knights of medieval times. This guy's going to dress like a bat. This guy's going to wear S on his chest, and they're going to stand up in front of all the rest of us because we're not physically capable of doing it. Because we don't have abilities, we don't have money, we don't have power, we don't have speed. They're going to set themselves up as gods almost and say, okay, we're going to do the tough work that needs to be done. We're going to help people. We're going to put ourselves out there. As long as that idealism doesn't die out, become silly or outdated or ridiculous, even though I guess you could say it's ridiculous. As long as people still adhere to that and find it fascinating, there's always going to be a need for comic books and to see these heroes in some sort of live action role. I, I love the MCU. You know that. I mean, I know you're a big fan as well. in terms of what the comics can do, how they can affect people in terms of Batman in the comics, what do you think about, again, the movies have gotten it wrong with Batman more times than the books have, I believe, but the books had a lot more years to get it right, a lot more chances, a lot of different creators. Does the film universe hurt this character to some degree, you think?
I don't think it does. I think for some people, that's their first introduction to the character.
Mm.
And I mean, just like you and I can sit here and say our first introduction to a character was the 60s show. I think the thing is, some people will never be interested in reading comics. And I have to get this clear to some people that are like, oh, comics are doing better than they ever have because of the movies. No, comics are more relevant than they ever have because of the movies, and more
Mm.
people know about these characters. But that doesn't mean that those same people will walk into a comic book store and buy a comic. Maybe some of these people will go into a Barnes and Noble, if Barnes and Noble still exists in your city, and buy a graphic novel and buy a few comics. But that doesn't mean everyone will do that. I don't think that it ruins the character or ruins the comic. I think that those things just both exist in two different worlds. It's just like, we're both wrestling fans. There are some people that their entire experience with wrestling is watching WWE, and WWE is wrestling, but it's wrestling with italics on it. I,
Right.
the best the best description I've seen of some of this is that somebody will be like, all right, well, wrestling WWE is chocolate covered, quote unquote. It's not chocolate. So it's like WWE is wrestling flavored television. It's
Oh, it's cheese product. It's not cheese.
Yeah, and I feel
Right.
like the comic book movies are the same thing, and I feel like that goes back to my Dark Knight take, and I feel like Dark Knight is a Christopher Nolan movie with some of the trappings of Batman, but it's not
Mm.
necessarily a Batman movie. Like there's certain things that make it not a Batman movie. It like I just recently watched Tenet, and it has a lot of the same kind of the themes. It has a lot of the same Nolan isms to it, for lack of a word. Like it has, you can tell it's a Nolan movie, and I feel like that's the same thing with Dark Knight. Those are Nolan films. Like those are Nolan's takes on what a Batman film would be.
Right.
And I feel like it's the same with a lot of comic book movies. They are comic book themed, but at the end of the day, they're adaptations. They're not like the pure essence of what a comic is. If you want that, then you got to go to the source.
Yeah, there's nothing like the books, kids. Buy a comic. For crying out loud. What are you waiting on? If you enjoyed the movies in the slightest, buy a freaking comic. Download it. You can don't have to hold it in your hands. Crazy. I don't get it. I've
Yeah, I,
I've
I
been
just think
collecting back issues like crazy. So
Yeah, and I think people like us that have read comics for years or enjoy, the medium for what is will always feel that way. But there are some people that is their experience with comic fandom, and that's all they want it to be. And in some ways, those people with that view of Batman and it's just this dark adult take, they see it that way because that's all they know.
right, exactly. So we've talked about Alfred, why he needs Alfred, why Alfred is necessary. We haven't said a lot about Jim Gordon, if anything. Um, why does he need Jim Gordon? What is the dichotomy between these two guys? I mean, Jim Gordon is sworn to uphold the law in a very, very corrupt city. And but yet he's working shoulder to shoulder with a mass vigilante. I mean, why does this work, and why does Bruce need Jim Gordon as an ally?
Because in some ways, I think Batman needs to exist inside the system. I think he needs to, in some ways, believe that the system can work. And I see a lot of people that are like, okay, it clearly doesn't work because Joker always escapes, and you always end up having to go get him and lock him up again instead of just killing him. But I think the thing about Batman as a character is he needs to believe he needs to believe that, law and order works. He needs to believe that I can exist outside of the law, but there are some people like Jim that also need to exist inside of um, GCPD in order for GCPD to get better.
Mhm. Right, right, because you get cleaning up from the inside, right? Yeah. Uh, because if he doesn't believe that law and order can come into play here, then he would just be killing people. He wouldn't have any qualms about it. But the sense of right and wrong to this guy. I was going to say justice, but that feels more like a Daredevil trope than a Batman thing, you know.
Yeah,
But the idea of right and wrong, he is obsessed with that as well. So no, he would always think, well, no, look, they're going to Arkham Asylum. Arkham Asylum is a character in and of itself for this guy. I
yeah,
mean, dude, without Arkham, where do all these crazy people end up going, man?
yeah. And I mean, hey, just in case you're listening to this and you think we're beating up on Dark Knight a lot, that is one of the things that Dark Knight gets absolutely correct and it gets perfect. Is he exists as Batman, but they do this great thing with the guy that's dressing up as Batman and he's doing what he's doing. And he makes it clear that no, you cannot be what I am.
Right.
You need to do the right thing in your place. Like I can be a symbol for you, but I at the end of the day, I'm just a symbol. I don't you cannot do what I do. It's the same thing with Jim. Jim exists in his lane. He might revere Batman in some ways and look up to him, but he still needs to do his job, and he still needs to believe that um, police work can work as well.
Right, right.
And
I'm
that's
not
why,
wearing I'm not wearing hockey pads, right?
and that's why his monologue at the end of Dark Knight is so great because it's a perfect depiction of what Batman is to Gotham and what Jim believes.
And you know, that monologue, I'm so glad you brought that up. That monologue at the end of that film tells me that Nolan got it. He really did. I think in terms of directors. Now, dude, here's a great one. Best Batman director, in my opinion, is Chris Nolan because I think he gets the character. You can say, well, Burton gets the imagery, the stylistic part of it, the little bit of comedy, the eccentric, Bruce Wayne's eccentric. I get it. But in terms of, I get this guy, I know what he is, I think that's Chris Nolan.
Yeah, and I think some of that is Nolan made his movies in the 2000s, and then the Batman in the 90s was made before a lot of things like Long Halloween were even written. Like, I
Mm.
think the closest we had then was some of the Miller stuff was written in the 80s, but yeah, by 2000s we had a long list of great graphic novels and source material that you can go to and play off of.
Very true. Yeah. That's a great point. He did have stuff to draw from for sure. But also you can argue that that affects his understanding and he embraces it and says, "No, I totally get it. I know what this guy is." That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think he has a better understanding of the character. But I was just making a point that I think that there's so much material out there that has done such a deep dive into who Batman is, and so you could go back and read all that stuff. Like everything he does in Dark Knight with Joker is it's influenced by things like the Man Who Laughs, or the Killing Joke, or even the Grant Morrison Arkham Asylum book. All of that stuff is there. I mean, and you could clearly see nods to Long Halloween and Dark Knight.
Mhm. Oh, for sure. So two-part question. One, what's your expectations of all the Bat guys, the Batman and the Flash film? Apparently, we're all going to see, including Keaton. And also, what's your expectations for the Robert Pattinson, the Batman, coming out a year from now?
I don't know what to make of any of the movies coming out. I kind of feel like they should step away from Batman movies for a while.
Hmm.
We've had a good, good to decent Batman movie in almost every decade. I feel like it's time to just do other characters. Even if you want to do a Terry McGinnis movie, which I'm just
Ooh,
dying for them to make a Batman Beyond movie. I want it so bad. Um, do something else different though. Like, And I mean, I'm sure that the Pattinson movie is gonna be fine. The director is great. He directed the Planet of the Apes movies.
Right.
Um, and I mean, they've got some good material to play off of. It looks like they're doing some of this based off of the Snyder run. From as far as I can tell, I'm interested in seeing a different, more serious version of the Riddler. I'm interested to see what they're gonna do with that. There's cool stuff that there's to look forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing Keaton on film as Batman again. That's interesting. Now, do I think it'll be good? I don't know, but we're here for the ride.
I think that's kind of all the fanboys right now are going. Well, we'll see, because they again, kids hate to keep reminding everybody this is not Marvel we're talking about, but this is not Marvel we're talking about. I love that Nolan got it right. I love that Burton had a concept of it, but a lot of Marvel guys get it. Not just one guy, a lot of them get it. So when they get to play with the toys, they know how to play with them and then put them back in the box better than when they found them. So when you hear about Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness, when you hear about a Spider-Man film of various different Spider-Man, my question is, is Kevin Feige on set? It'll be fine. Because I know that he surrounds himself with people who buy into his vision, who aren't afraid to say, Kevin, I think we should go this direction. And everybody, at least we're led to believe, comes to some sort of consensus about what's going to work best for the characters and for the fans. And I just don't know if I get that with the distinguished competition. And I hate to be
Well,
that way, but that's how I feel.
yeah, I mean, there are times when I feel like they've done great. There are things that I think that they've done fantastic with. Um, I never want to make anything a DC bashathon because
Right,
I
right, right.
enjoy DC Comics. I grew up a Marvel kid. Of course, my preference is Marvel because that's where a lot of my favorite characters are. But there are a lot of DC books that I love. My biggest gripe with them isn't necessarily all right. Well, this depiction isn't what I want it to be, so boo-hoo. It's just that I want to see them succeed, and I want to see them do new and different things. And so
Yes.
it's never all right. Well, Justice League wasn't what I wanted. I actually really wanted Justice League to succeed. I didn't enjoy watching it fail. And
Right.
like I said before when we recorded this thing, it shouldn't be this hard to do a Justice League movie. It shouldn't be that hard to get a lot of these characters on screen.
Yeah, it just does. It seems like, I don't want to use the word chore, but it seems like the themes can be so simple at the foundation level, but I don't know. It's like taking a really really good steak and over seasoning it, overcooking it, using marinade, a wet marinade on a steak. What's wrong with you people? And just, you know what I mean? And like by the time you get it to the plate, you're like, this is a filet mignon? This? All it needed was a little bit of salt and pepper and sear it on both sides and eat it medium rare maybe, and it's perfect. It just seems like there's just way too many ingredients on some of these films, some of these characters. Um, I don't know. I think at any given point, Marvel could have, went south if had. There's a lot of ingredients in that universe too. They just happen to find chefs that know how to put them in the proper mix, and you get a better steak, maybe. And
Yeah.
and that's not to say that Warner Brothers isn't trying. I think the effort's there, but I just think that the creators they have in place aren't always the best choices, in my opinion.
The thing is, I think that the problem that the DC films has gotten into, and I think that it started during the Nolan films, is it's gotten into this world where it's like we have to tell you all these things instead of showing you. And I think
Yeah.
the what makes the Marvel films so good in some ways is there's a lot of show not tell. And on the surface they look like these big loud action films. And in a lot of ways they are popcorn flicks, but they do manage to fit a lot of the characterization in there, and they do manage to fit a lot of like the psychosis and stuff for these characters in there without you know beating you over the head with all of this either exposition or overly mature filmmaking. And like I said, that's not a knock at Nolan, but I think the thing is there's one Nolan. Nolan can do these things intelligently, and then there's people that want to come behind it that want to do the Nolan take, but do it less intelligently and do it in their way that is quote unquote mature, but it's not as well thought out.
Yeah, you got to spend time with this. I mean, Phil, as you said earlier, are we really sitting back demanding an adult Batman? The fans as a whole, are we really demanding a mature Bat? I think we just want a good story. I mean,
Yeah, I think we want a good story. I mean, and again, I don't want to keep going to back to '60s Batman, but the '60s Batman thing is people want to have fun. They want to go to the movies and have fun.
right.
And if I go to the movies and I come out feeling miserable, I don't think that's necessarily fun. And that's not to say that you can't do dark movies and they still be fun. But there's a line. There's only so much that you can do with these things, and they're still fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. The entertainment value has to be there. And it's, if you leave a superhero film feeling bad, like you said, being depressed, everything's on fire, the whole place is wrecked. Oh, it's another one of those. Great.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I still say I've never been to a movie and had the reaction that I've seen throughout a theater like Infinity War. And
Yeah.
just the complete hush over the entire crowd. And we're just all looking at the credits like, wait, that's it?
Right.
They lost?
Right.
There's a way to do a fun movie and do loss and handle it well. And do it in a compelling way. But if it's just you come out of this thing and it's just sensory overload and it's just like I mean, here's a perfect example. When I walked out of Batman versus Superman, I was walking next to a kid, and this kid looked miserable. I mean, he was looking like, "What did I just watch?" And he turned to his mother and was like, "Mom, is Superman dead?" And I was just like, "I don't think you
Jeez.
should leave I don't think you should leave a tentpole story that's setting up Justice League feeling that way."
Yeah. You should never leave a theater asking the question, Mom, is Superman dead? What?
It's it's different when you set up a story where the superheroes lose
Yeah.
and you walk out of Infinity War asking, is Spider-Man dead or is Black Panther dead? But that's after almost 10 years of filmmaking where you gave us triumphant moments.
Yeah. 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 You're building to it. You're earning it, as you said before. You're earning this. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. We could do another 2 hours on this guy. There's a lot of stuff we haven't even touched on. He's in the top. He's in the top. The character himself, forget the movies. The character himself is top 5 greatest superheroes of all time. He has to be. For a lot of people, he's number 1. He's not my personal number 1, although I do love him. Again, it's all subjective, folks, but no one can deny. And this is a credit to DC. This is a credit to fans who embraced him. You can show that Batman logo, much like the Superman logo. You can show that logo in a third world country. I guarantee you, unless it's a tribe that lives in the jungle and have no connection to the outside world, someone in that small town, that rural village, is going to know that symbol. That kid is going to know, like, that's Batman in his own language. That's Batman, because that's credit to DC. This character is beloved, and whether you're a hardcore fan or a casual moviegoer or whatever, or just a dude on his couch watching TV, you just want a good story. I think make it as simple as possible. He's an icon, Phil. I mean, Batman is an absolute icon in this genre, no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think he is. There's a reason why he's one of the most popular comic book characters in the entire world. And no, he's not my personal favorite, but it'd be hard to deny that he is one of the most, whether I'd agree with every interpretation of him. He's one of the most well depicted characters throughout comics and movies, because we just by sheer quantity. We've
Right.
had so many either great comic book properties based on them, whether that's the animated series or the movies or the animated movies. There's so much. And that's why I'm like, even if you don't like Dark Knight or you don't like the Burton movies, there's something else for you somewhere else.
Yeah, and this character is 83 years old, kids. Let's don't forget about that. He's 83 years old. I mean, that's mind blowing. I can't even. I mean, you think about the time put in again, and I've said the words creators here, and I think we should be mentioning the men and women who have handled this character over the years. They deserve all the props. They deserve all the credit in the world for keeping this character alive, for writing classy stories, for writing great stories, for again, we talked about Frank Miller, and I was kind of blaming Frank for the adult tones that we've been inundated with over the years. But Frank Miller deserves a lot of credit for putting this book, for putting this character on the map in a big bad way, for bringing him back and making him relevant in a way that he had never really been relevant before. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy, man.
I mean, think about it this way: what I just said about Dark Knight as a movie, and what you're saying about what Frank Miller did with the comics, they're they're two parts of the same kind of conversation. Because I feel like the Nolan films changed Batman's depiction in movies for better or worse, and it's the same way for Frank Miller. It just changed everything. And yeah, you're gonna have people that are going to it's gonna inspire to do better things, but you're also gonna have people that are just doing a cover version of what that person did and just not doing it as well. That's just what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, I can't even. And by the way, he's actually is he all right? So 1939. Yeah, he's been around for a long time. And what's dude? Just think about this. And again, we don't want to end the show on a well. I left this show feeling miserable. I don't want to do that. But dude, this character is going to outlive both of us, our
No, of
kids,
course.
maybe our grandkids. Dude, that's mind blowing to me. Like much like Sherlock Holmes, the Frankenstein's monster, Dracula. Dude, Batman has taken his place in the mythos of great literary characters. He really has.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that that's what's so great about comic books. I mean, these are characters that are going to live on and on for generations. Um, And it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be right. It's not always going to be what everybody wants it to be. I mean, there are great Sherlock Holmes movies. There are Sherlock Holmes movies that I don't like. It is
Right,
what it is.
right. Yeah. Yeah, if you look at it in those terms and in that light, and maybe it changes the conversation. Maybe it changes maybe some of the criticism. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't. Some people just love to hate stuff. But I'm with you. I do want this character to. I want DC to get it right, and I'm gonna be straight with you. We may do a 6M next year after the Pattinson movie, and you're on this show going, I cannot believe how good that movie was. It seems like how many different ways can you boil an egg? What can they possibly do to do better than Chris Nolan? But maybe they'll find a way, man.
Yeah, I mean, long as it's different, it doesn't try to be exactly what Nolan did, or it doesn't try to be, what anyone else has done. Maybe for me, I'm just kind of done doing the origin over and over again.
Right.
But I want them to do something different. But I mean, hey, I am here for the ride. I'm never gonna be like it's kind of like when the Amazing Spider-Man movie started. It's like I'm not really here to just go, okay, well let's do the origin again. But well, I'm here to see it. I'm not gonna not see a Spider-Man movie.
Right, right, yeah. Right, of course. Yeah, you're going to give it a chance. Um again, kids, this character is going to live on. And it's I'm actually really happy about that. I mean, a lot of my childhood is as Phil said, I was a Marvel kid also. I still am in case no one can tell. But I do have a lot of Batman in the long boxes, a lot of Batman, a lot of great stories in there, a lot of stuff that I grew up and grew into a man reading and appreciate about the character. He is one of my favorites for sure. So he will live on. And that's a good thing. Phil, narrow it down for me, my friend. Let me get your last word on the Dark Knight.
I think would not be a stretch to say he is not just one of the greatest comic book characters of all time. He's probably, like you said earlier, one of the greatest literary creations ever. He's one of those iconic characters that's just gonna stand the test of time.
For sure. And we're all about the creators here, folks. I think I've driven that point home here as well if I've done nothing else today. We got to give credit where credit's due. Bill Finger finally got his just due on this character. A lot of people who had stories to tell through the years said Bob Kane had very little to do with the actual creation. I'm not here to throw judgment on these guys. I wasn't there. I can just go off second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth hand information over the years as we get it. Bill Finger had a lot to do with the way this character looks. The classic iconic suit, the bat on his chest, the whole nine. So, we'll throw props where it's due. To all the creators who have worked on this character, who will handle him in the future. Again, we just want a good story, folks. That's all we're looking for. I want to see him continue. I love going to a theater to see a Batman film. I do. I just, to Ben Affleck, who I think gave forth maximum effort, who I think in a different timeline would have been the best Batman maybe we've ever seen. But, I don't think that's going to come to pass here, in my opinion. We'll see what happens in the future. As Phil said, I'm along for the ride as well. We'll see how they handle it. The books are always there, kids. They're always going to be there with any luck. So go read some Batman. Enjoy yourself. And as we said, we'll see what happens next. And that is Batman. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.